difficult to see the news and not feel worried about the future. But you're not alone. Many people feel the same way. In this webinar, we'll talk about what climate anxiety is, why it's happening, and what you can do about it. And we really hope this webinar will help you feel more empowered and informed to deal with climate anxiety. Our presenters will be Ayana and Yasir from VIBGYOR High NIBM, as well as Sarah and Rizwan from VIBGYOR High Marathahalli. Now, without any further delay, let's initiate the webinar. Before we begin, we have a poll question we're going to put in the chat. Presenters, please unmute and turn on your cameras.
Hello?
Yes, Ayana, you're audible.
Yeah, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, Sarah, you're audible. Is everyone able to see the question or?
Okay,
All
let's
right.
begin this webinar with a rather direct question. What is your opinion on climate anxiety? Let's start with Sarah.
Thank you, Haya. I feel that climate anxiety is a very crucial up and coming issue and that it needs to be addressed immediately. While climate anxiety isn't exactly a medical diagnosis, it's a fast growing popular term that describes a collection of syndromes that are triggered by long term shifts in the temperature and the weather patterns. As we can see, the news reports highlight that climate disasters like flood, melting glaciers, and vanishing lakes have sparked an increase in the anxiety about the planet's future. I think that climate anxiety usually arises when there is an in depth understanding of climate change that reflects the profound sense of fear or helplessness. And as a teenager, there have been a few key moments when climate anxiety has really struck me, especially as I became aware of the full scope of the crisis. Even though climate anxiety makes you feel helpless or sad, I also believe that it encourages you to take action and face the problem with appropriate measures. That is my input on climate anxiety.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. That was a rather remarkable take. And Yasser, we were going to ask about his views on climate anxiety, but it appears he's unable to unmute. So we will redirect the question later.
Now, talking about the psychological impacts of global warming is essential, but it's even more important to address the people who are directly or indirectly affected by this and don't get the help they need. On that note, Rizwan, what's your opinion on the impact of vulnerable populations?
Is Rizwan present in the meeting? Okay, I think he's facing some issues. He is not present here. Um, Ayana, what do you have to say about the various mental impacts of global warming?
Yeah.
How have symptoms manifested in your school? My bad.
Thank you. I would like to speak about this. Yeah. So, global warming significantly impacts mental health, especially among students. Many students experience eco anxiety and they fear the planet's future, climate grief, mourning. Then they start mourning environmental degradation. This leads to hopelessness, apathy, or stress from constant exposure to alarming climate news. Students will also start feeling existential dread about life's purpose amid other global threats, and then they'll also start feeling anger towards other older generations or other political leaders due to their perceived inaction. In schools, these emotions manifest behavioral changes like irritability, withdrawal, or avoidance of climate discussions. Academically, some students struggle to focus while others channel their concerns into environmental activism, and mental health struggles including disrupted sleep and counseling needs are increasing. However, though it has its negative effects, it also has positive effects, like students start forming peer groups to support each other, and they start spreading more awareness using different methods like art, writing, advocacy, and they have multiple different coping mechanisms, and they also address these concerns through education support system and fostering hope driven actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayana. Now, youth struggling with climate anxiety truly believe that they have no future and thus don't feel like they can have children or grow a family of their own. What do you have to say about this, Rizwan, who is not in the meeting? So, when concerns of climate change have planted the seed of doubt, I think talking about the consequences of this phenomenon resulting in global warming is also equally important. So, Sarah, what do you have to say about this as a student from Bangalore?
Haya, as a student from Bangalore, I can see firsthand. Uh, I can see firsthand how climate change and global warming are already affecting our lives. Bangalore, which is traditionally known for its pleasant weather, is experiencing hotter temperatures and very unpredictable rainfall patterns. These shifts are even more concerning in a city like Bangalore, which is one of the world's fastest growing tech hubs and is facing rapid urbanization and growing pollution levels. The increased temperatures and heat waves make everyday life very uncomfortable for the citizens of Bangalore. I feel that Bangalore's transition from the garden city of India to the Silicon Valley, it has come with its set of consequences. An example of this can be seen in the recent water crisis that shook the entire city. There were many places which did not even have access to clean drinking water. It's crucial that we start taking this issue seriously because the effects of global warming are already upon us and they will only intensify in the future.
Thank you, Sarah. That was remarkably insightful coming from someone who lives in Bangalore as well. Yeah, I mean, I especially really liked your take on the shift from the Garden City to the Silicon Valley, definitely having its own impacts. Thank you so much. We'd also like to ask a Pune resident to comment. Yasir, if you can unmute, is it possible for you to comment? Okay, I think he's still attempting to rejoin, so that's all right. Uh, okay, okay, we will move on.
Um, Now we've got a significantly interesting element of climate anxiety, the role of the media. Before we begin, we have a question to ask the audience in the question and answers tab.
Can everyone see the question?
Not yet.
Okay.
Could you perhaps share this question with us on the chat?
Okay, I think that is more feasible. Um, it appears chat is disabled for me. Okay, I think is the question visible now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Everyone feel free to reply and either comment or react to this with a thumbs up if you agree. And while we are waiting for our interesting array of answers, we can now turn to our presenters. Ayana, has the media only increased your fear of global warming and its impending consequences, or has it also gone the other end of the spectrum and contributed to decreasing it?
So the media basically plays a dual role in shaping public fear around climate change. On one hand, it increases fear through sensationalism, that is, by spreading frequent negative coverage, focusing on catastrophic scenarios like wildfires and floods without balance, like without giving proper solutions. And these stories often lean toward doom narratives or lack focus on solutions, leaving audiences feeling powerless and hopeless. And a lot of the times media also politicizes a lot of the environmental issues. Like an example is the Mumbai Metro RA colony controversy, and that further fueled division and mistrust. But on the other hand, the media reduces fear by sharing empowering information about solutions, and they showcase success stories of progress, providing informational educational content that explains climate issues without alarmism. And then they also highlight youth activism that inspires and gives a sense of hope and emphasizes on collective action. And the overall impact depends on individual perception, like it depends on how you take it. While some feel increased eco anxiety from alarming coverage, the other people find motivation to act. They turn their fear into proactive involvement when the media emphasizes solution and hope, and they balance awareness with empowerment, and that is a key to fostering constructive engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayana. Sarah, how have your experiences as a part of the youth been with climate anxiety surrounding you?
As a teenager, I would say that experiencing climate anxiety is something that feels very real and overwhelming. Growing up in a world where the effects of climate change are becoming more pronounced day by day, it's hard not to worry about the future. I feel that studies show that people who are most affected by climate change often can't afford the basic necessities like air conditioning, etc. And in school, we often discuss the impact of climate change. And while it's empowering to learn about the solutions and sustainable methods, there's also the underlying fear of what comes next. I think that many of us feel that despite the small efforts that we take, like recycling or reducing waste, the change needed seems too massive to be addressed in such a short span. In the end, while climate anxiety is real, it's also very motivating. It makes me want to take small steps in my own life. But more importantly, it drives me to be a part of a larger movement that pushes for a very lasting change.
Thank you, Sarah, for your insightful words and for your experiences as well.
We'd also like to ask, speaking of the role of media, our digital age has definitely grown more dynamic. Now there's information spreading everywhere and millions of sources, and to keep up with it, a generation that's pretty much learned to adapt to it now. Yasser, what do you have to say about kids growing up with climate anxiety?
Well, thank you. In today's digital age, the sheer volume of information we encounter daily has become a boon and a bane both. On one hand, it does create a greater awareness about critical issues like climate change, but on the other hand, it has fueled climate anxiety among the younger generations. As a result, kids and adolescents growing up in a hyper-connected environment are being exposed to these urgent realities of our environment crisis. And overwhelming floods of news, statistics, and narratives can lead them to a confusing stress. As climate anxiety increases, low climate literacy decreases. Because as and when people are getting aware about their environment, they may or may not experience climate anxiety. So this digital age, it does connect the people to the harsh environmental issues, but it also decreases the risk of climate literacy.
Thank you, Yasir. And now we're going to be moving on to socioeconomic factors in climate anxiety.
Ayana,
Ayana,
how do you have any of these socioeconomic factors manifested in your life, and where have you seen it especially create an impact?
So, climate change manifests in life through stark disparities tied to economic inequality. We see this a lot in low-income families as they struggle to afford eco-friendly options like solar panels or electric vehicles, and they face greater impacts from rising utility costs or extreme weather such as heat waves without cooling. Educational access also varies with wealthier schools offering robust environmental programs, while underfunded schools lack resource and awareness. And health impacts are also profound, as vulnerable communities often face pollution related illnesses like asthma or heat stroke, and these are worsened by limited healthcare access. Community resilience highlights this disparity. Wealthier areas rebuild quickly after disasters, while poorer neighborhoods may take years. Rural areas also often experience isolation from disaster relief or climate education. But youth activism and mental health responses also reflect these inequalities. Privileged students can engage in climate process while others are constrained by work or survival needs. Coping with eco anxiety depends on access to therapy or support systems. Environmental injustice is starkly visible in low income areas where pollution sources are concentrated and disaster recovery is slower. And addressing these disparities is essential for equitable climate resilience.
that was an excellent answer. Thank you so much, Ayana. And could we also ask our guest speaker, Miss Andrea, to comment on this?
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I can't seem to get my camera to work, but it's great to be here. And yeah, as Diana correctly said, climate change doesn't affect everyone equally, and it's deeply tied to social and economic inequalities. Therefore, what I would like to add is that we need to be very careful that solutions to climate change do not reinforce these inequalities, but rather address inequalities to improve human rights and quality of life for everyone. So solutions to climate change, I think, must prioritize the needs of more vulnerable groups and actively include them in decision making. And actually, research has found that ecological restoration projects, for example, where indigenous people and local communities have been actively involved from the start of the project, are more successful. And in fact, there are so many examples of people from vulnerable groups, such as indigenous people or women, leading powerful projects and beautiful initiatives in response to climate change. So I would say let's ensure everyone's voice is heard and valued as we address both climate change and also the emotional impact that it has on people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Andrea, for your insightful words. I would now like to ask Yasir, have you seen any examples of education reducing climate anxiety? And would you say climate anxiety is higher in places where the population is illiterate?
Surely. And yes, I have seen many examples of where the climate literacy happens. For example, near my societies, there is a Anandvan Reserve Forest where there are many people of the authorities who encourage children and youth to join, and they also educate themselves so that they can help reduce climate anxiety. And there's a connection between literacy and climate anxiety, because in the regions which have lower literacy rates, there are several factors which contribute to climate anxiety, but it's also important to note that lower literacy rates may correlate with high levels of climate anxiety, because education alone is not a silver bullet. And to address climate anxiety, it does require a multifaceted approach, including better access to mental health and support, community building efforts, and climate action initiatives. And lastly, social policies which support these vulnerable populations can also help.
Thank you so much for that answer, Yasser, and also for the personal observation being added to that. That really grounded your answer. And now I'd like to ask Sarah, what are some moments where climate anxiety really struck you?
I feel that there have been a few key moments when climate anxiety has really struck me, and that's especially when I became more aware of the full scope of the crisis and how it affects people. One of the first times I felt climate anxiety was during the water crisis of Bangalore. In my own city, Bangalore has been facing water shortages in the recent years, and there are even areas where people no longer have access to the clean water. The fear that we might not be able to make the changes necessary, it's a constant source of anxiety. And the struggle for basic resources in a city that once had an abundance of lakes and groundwater, it felt personal. And also, as a person born in Kerala, hearing about the devastating landslides in Wayanad, it undoubtedly triggered a lot of feelings of climate anxiety for me. Wayanad is usually known for its lush landscapes and forests, but it also is vulnerable to the effects of climate change, especially during the heavy rainfall that it faces in the monsoon season. It hit me hard when I realized that climate change could make a basic need even more challenging for our future generations. I think the main thing about climate anxiety is that it's about finding hope in the action we can take while still being realistic about the challenges that we face in our day to day lives.
Thank you, Sarah. You've really highlighted mostly everything there is about climate anxiety. Uh, Ayana, are there any methods you'd recommend to comfort yourself and help anyone else with climate worries?
Yeah. So we to stay positive amidst all of these climate concerns, we need to focus on the solutions and progress. We need to firstly learn about advancements in renewable energy and community conservation. We need to celebrate small wins like recycling and engage in local environmental initiatives. Taking action is empowering. We need to advocate for policies, make sustainable lifestyle changes, or volunteer for collective efforts like cleanups. Building resilience through community is key. Share your feelings, form support groups, and encourage education to inspire collective action. Balance climate news intake by limiting exposure to sensationalist media and set boundaries for when to engage with the news. Personal coping mechanisms like mindfulness, spending time in nature, expressing emotions creatively can all alleviate anxiety. Educate and empower others through mentorship and leading by example. Inspiring is to learn to inspire change in your circle. Finally, seek professional help if needed. Climate aware therapists and workshops can offer tools to manage eco anxiety and grief. And together, these steps can foster hope, action, and resilience in facing climate changes.
That was, I think something our audience will definitely take to heart. It's really reassuring to hear that, we recognize that this is a problem now and we're starting to find more solutions for this. So thank you, Ayana. And now, coming back to our own Climate Academy as members, Uh, Yasir, how would you say Climate Academy has helped you work with your climate anxiety? Are there any other sources or videos or documentaries you'd recommend for dealing with climate anxiety?
So, Climate Academy, first of all, has helped me in a lot many ways. Because previously, around I think before joining Climate Academy, I did not know many of the terms which I do know now. And it also helped me create awareness about the climate and also help others to raise their awareness about the climate.
Thank you, Yasir.
Um,
I'm sure we all see Climate Academy as a way to deal with the climate anxiety that we face.
Plus, Climate Academy does emphasize more on how educating yourself about how climate anxiety works and how climate change can be dealt with also is like one of the main steps we should be taking towards this. So, yeah, it's really relatable to hear someone say there are a lot of terms that you hadn't heard about before you joined. And, we're all learning together and growing together. So that's pretty great to hear. And Ayana, what will you say?
Yeah, before I was in Climate Academy, I wasn't aware of like how much global warming can really affect everything around us. Earlier, we used to think that just us doing something simple like recycling or something wouldn't make that big of a change. But then now, when you see that when you do something, others take inspiration and they try to replicate what you're doing, and then this soon forms a chain, and with this there's a collective action, and then this would really help impacting like it would really impact global warming and everything. And it has also like helped me understand a lot of the problems that I probably would not have understood if I wasn't in academy. Thank
That's really great to hear. And Sarah, is there anything you'd also like to say?
Um, I feel that Climate Academy has played a very important part in helping me cope with climate anxiety. It has provided me a sense of direction and empowerment, and it's made a significant difference in how I approach the issue. Instead of simply worrying about it, I've started to take action to try and control the situation from my part. Climate anxiety has also helped me by giving me a platform to turn my anxiety into something really productive. And I think climate anxiety also fosters a sense of community. By connecting me with like minded peers who share my same concerns, I don't feel isolated in my worries anymore. We have discussions, workshops, and collaborative projects where we brainstorm the ideas on how to combat climate change. I think that all these points are very helpful to me, and that climate anxiety has played a very crucial role in helping me cope with climate anxiety.
Thank you, Sarah. We also have a student here who was part of the Conference of Parties 29. So, can I have Arjun Dhapne to say a few words about this?
Arjun, are you there? Can you unmute? Could you drop a message in the chat if you're struggling with unmuting?
Yeah. Sorry about that. My network is a bit patchy. Could you just repeat the question once for me, Haya? I don't think I'm going to be able to switch on my camera.
It's okay. We just wanted to know your experience at the Conference of Parties 29.
Okay, sure. So this year, a few weeks ago, I went with a couple of my classmates and more people from NIBM and from the Mumbai branches of VIBGYOR to Baku to attend the COP29 conference. Now, I've been to a couple of events like this, but the magnitude of this was like it took me aback for a second. And it was awe-inspiring, to say the least, to see so many people all gathered in one place representing a collective cause. It was moving to me to find out that so many people in the world actually care about this and are well educated enough to mobilize change. And I met some people there, like if I can remember the names, I don't think I can, but there were a lot of organizations there, not just climate based organizations, but agricultural organizations, commercial organizations from across the world that were pitching in their ideas as to how they were making their sectors more sustainable for the future. So it was really moving to me to see like our current world leaders in action, debating, discussing, uh, coming up with new ideas to like solve the climate crisis. And I think, as you might have heard recently, the new NCQG at the COP29 conference was released, and I'm pretty sure they're trying to mobilize around $300 billion worldwide for the loss and damage fund, which is basically a fund from which mainly uh, economically weaker countries or underdeveloped countries can draw resources from to become more climate resilient, tackle their tackle natural disasters or natural hazards that occur as a result of climate change, and to get closer to achieving their own sustainability goals. So it was frankly quite fantastic, and I think a great example of collective action. Uh, and yeah, that's my take on it.
That, it's really inspiring to hear now about the kind of action that our world has and all of the countries are taking to not only recognize an issue, but to start implementing effective solutions. Um, Arjun, can we ask you to comment a little more on the NCQG, which, by the way, stands for the New Collective Quantified Goal on Climate Finance, and it has been set up in the COP29.
Sure, sure. So the NCQG it's been talked about for quite a few COP conferences. If I'm not wrong, I think the first mention of a loss and damage fund came about at last year's COP28, or perhaps COP27. I might be wrong here, but I think it was COP28. And what this NCQG aims to establish is, particularly on part of the larger, more developed nations, they want to be able to. The particular dilemma here was that underdeveloped countries were being criticized for their CO2 emissions, uh, that they were emissions that were coming out as a result of their progressing and their development. While historically, the developed countries, if you had to look at the time scale of emissions, CO2 emissions being released and major contributors to climate change, historically, the developed countries in the emissions that were caused as a result of their actions far outweigh what underdeveloped countries are actually in the process of doing right now. See, they're just doing the same thing that developed countries did before climate change became such a big problem. And the dilemma here is, and they are the dilemma here is, how can you criticize an underdeveloped country which needs to go through this phase of so-called being a polluter country, to actually progress its own facilities, to uh, raise healthcare standards in their own country, while not penalizing all the developed countries who have already done this and practically have to go through no repercussions for it. So this was the proposed solution: a loss and damage fund for underdeveloped nations, and basically as a way to, one of the many strategies that they have come up with for kind of having cooperation between developed and underdeveloped nations, so as to combat this disparity, this economical disparity, and this disparity as to who has more responsibility and who has to take up more responsibility for addressing this issue. There are a couple of other things as well. I believe capacity building is another popular strategy that is being talked about at the climate conferences. But when it comes to the NCQG, one of the biggest drawbacks of this NCQG and of the COP29 conference was the fact that the US's non-participation actually, and this was subject to a lot of criticism about the NCQG, which was, how can these countries claim to be, not that they shouldn't mobilize $300 billion for a loss and damage fund. It is definitely a step in the right direction, The question is, how are they going to do it without the US's support? And this question arises mainly due to the change in the administration in the US. As now, as we know, uh, very soon next year, President Trump will be the new president of the United States of America. And this change in parliament has raised questions as to how much the US will be supporting this cause. So this might be a major uh, hurdle that countries will have to collectively face, because US is like one of the most economically developed countries in the world. Without their support, it will be significantly more difficult. But nevertheless, countries are determined as ever. And from what I've seen at the COP29 conference, people are enthusiastic, and there are many good people and many good innovators, leaders, and many good ideas out there that might be able to overcome this challenge. And all I can hope for is the best. So yeah, that is a little bit about the new NCQG.
Thank you, Arjun, for giving this insightful answer. We also have Brahmkirat, who I believe was part of the COP29. Could you give us some of your views on this?
Hello, could you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, first of all, thank you, yeah, Haya. So I'm Brahmjit Singh, and I recently attended COP. So as a member of Climate Academy, like of the younger generation, I was like, before joining Climate Academy and going to COP, I wasn't really like caring about climate change and what it could cause. But as I researched upon it, I become deeply concerned about the climate crisis. So before COP, I hadn't really gone to any big climate changing events. But at COP, seeing the type of like talks and like what all the companies were doing completely changed my view on what the climate crisis was actually was. At COP, there were many talks which I found really interesting. One such talk, which I think was one of my favorites, I was there with a bit of more of my classmates, was about investing in renewable energies, energies, and about the imitation of wind turbines. So basically, what these two were like, the imitation of wind turbine, the thing they were able to do is they're able to replicate like a mini wind turbine into a smaller and more compact machines for students, which in India I have never seen. It was really fun and really good because it shows that even the students were really invested into climate change and they knew it was a big crisis. The second thing which I found really interesting was about the renewable energy. The amount of talks and amount of like workshops of renewable energies was crazy. Two such were agro dairy and a biogas company. Agro dairy had an entire setup workshop just for understanding how they do agriculture in Azerbaijan Baku in context of in the future and sustainability. And it blew me away because in India, and like in India, I've never seen that. COP was just, it was not just an event which you could just go and it was like I thought COP was going to be totally different, honestly. I thought COP was going to be a small, like not a majorly changing event, but the people I saw over there, old people who were almost, they were like 50, 60 years old, they were so concerned about this climate change that they like, it was so crazy seeing them working for climate change at this age. The alarming rates of the global warming and devastating natural disasters was like there was no shortage of things related to that. The people who spoke had such big impacts. Their speeches made you want to go into climate change. This basically made me determined to contribute more to a sustainable and equitable and climate resilient world. So at COP, it basically made me into a climate warrior, which I never knew I had into it in me.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive and Honestly, quite relatable answer. It's really great to hear that, students who've attended this could also feel the magnitude of the event and the discussion taking place. And yeah, honestly, I think a lot of us now wish we could have been there with you guys. But yeah, it's really great to hear that the trip was helpful and kind of eye-opening for students like yourself. And thank you so much, everyone. We will now have Lakshita to share a few words to conclude our webinar.
All right. Thank you, Mridula, so much. So, basically, there was this poem I used to read all the time. I'll narrate it to you guys. It took me a long while to better the way you live. Since you have turned hostile, I have got no more to give. My land is filled with waste. My children are displaced. They live under utter fear, watching friends disappear. You treat me like a joke, choke me up with smoke, strip me of any clothes, and leave me with my foes. I have become man made, who serves you like a maid, unnatural and impure, a disease with no cure. The thing about this poem is that it has been 17 years since this beautiful poem was written by Susan Ching. Imagine how long it has been that it has been classified as a problem back then. So imagine the significance of this problem now. Okay, so uh, imagine our Earth was a massive ship, a vessel called Earth. For millennia, this ship has carried us safely through calm waters and fierce storms, providing everything we need to survive. But now alarms are bearing, the hull is cracking, the waters are rising, and we crew, we stand divided, uncertain, and worse, inactive. This ship is at its tipping point. It has the verge to collapse. Like it's at the edge of the it's at the edge of a triangle. It's like a beam balance. And in on top of that beam balance, there's this ship. So either it'll go this side or it will stay. That is our decision. So if the whole population comes to one side together to make this ship balanced, then we can have a solution to this, to climate change and climate anxiety. Uh, so the weight of the ship is our collective choices. Pollution, deforestation, overconsumption is pulling towards the disaster. Imagine the crew of the ship hurry together in one side and tipping the dangers to capitalizing. That's where we stand today. So, apart from that, there are potential solutions that I think we can have, which is basically climate awareness. We fail to act it. The ship, beyond saving, the consequences do not even discriminate, will impact everyone. But if we act now, we can steer this up. Each step will take toward the right side. We can plant trees, we can conserve water, we can reduce waste and advocate clean energy. So, as a crew, there's always this line I always admired that how would we get independence if we weren't united? Is the same thing happening here, not with independence, but with saving our Mother Earth. So, as children, we are the first and the last generation who's facing this problem, right? Uh, we should be the first and the last generation, and I'm pretty sure that we are the only person who can save this. We can tell that we don't want our future to be in harm. As scientists, they are the navigators lighting the path for research and innovations. As environmentalists, they are watchflowers surrounding alarm and like alerting us that this thing will happen, this disaster will take place. And as humans, we all are passengers. We all are responsible for letting this information out, telling everyone to do this thing and to save climate, so that each and every person can rise up their collar and say that I haven't contributed to carbon emission, to global warming. So that's the thing. And Earth, it's not just a ship, it's our home. Together, we can tip a balance in right direction. We can move towards a horizon of hope, health, and harmony. But if we all take a step together, we all move to the side of action, responsibility, and change. So, if climate is changing, why aren't we? This is the motive of this webinar, I suppose, to increase climate awareness. And I request all the participants to tell your family members, to tell your friends that climate is an issue. We need to take a real action for this. And it's not someone else's problem, it's ours. The tipping point is here. The question is, will the ship sink or will we move together to save it? Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshita. That was incredible, and it's all made us look back and think what we can do to stop climate change. We also have a student named Kavya Samani. I do want to ask you what your views are on climate anxiety after the discussion in the webinar.
Good evening. First of all, what we understand by climate anxiety is that it is the distress about the climate change and how it has been impacting the world all over, and human existence, of course. Well, I think that climate anxiety is something that is quite ongoing right now in the younger generation. It is because we can see, we can feel it, we can basically understand, and we are facing it basically. So all the problems going on related to the climate change, global warming, and we also see the actions that are being taken. This is creating a lot of anxiety amongst all of us over here, due to which many of us have joined really, I mean, have taken steps at personal as well as professional levels. I think this can be combated by many ways. Like, we can, at least what we can do at our levels is focus on what we can control and avoid what we can. It's better to avoid what cannot be managed and to manage what cannot be avoided. That would be the main motive, I suppose, and this would actually help us all understand why climate anxiety has been so ongoing right now. Thank you.
That was a pretty excellent answer, honestly. I mean, there's so many quotes that have come out of this meeting that I could honestly put on t-shirts because that's just how impeccable they are. And, honestly, I just love that. Thank you so much. And now we'll be moving on to audience questions. You've heard our presenters speak and give their own opinions, and now we'd like to know yours. If you could please raise your hands, I will call out your name and you can ask any of our presenters your desired questions. Does anyone have anything they want to be asking our speakers? I believe a few questions can also go to our guest speaker, Andrea, if she's okay with it. Brahmakiran.
Yes, so this is a question to anyone. So it's about individual experience. So how do you think that climate change effects has affected your mental health, and what emotions do you experience when you think about the climate issues?
Who are you directing the question to again?
I am directing it to Haya.
Okay, thank you for your question. I think you want to know how personal experiences, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think
Related
when,
to the.
yes.
Sorry, you can.
So when we take a personal or individual effort to combat climate change, we're also putting out a base for others to do it. When they watch you, they're encouraged to do the same thing. And if everyone together, collective action, if everyone together does one thing that could help combat climate change, at the end of the day, it is a much larger and bigger thing. So whatever small step you take, just make sure that it's the right step and people are watching you and they're going to follow you. So it's better to take the right step. And of course, to stop climate change, we have to start with ourselves because, as the saying goes, charity starts at home. And each person's step does lead to something much larger.
Thank you.
That was a pretty beautiful answer. I think we can all agree. Um, Adrit, Adrit, are you speaking? I cannot hear you. Is it my connectivity or um, Haya, can you hear him?
No, he's on mute.
Adrit, if you cannot unmute, then is it possible for you to type it in the chat? Okay, while we're waiting, does any other member of the audience have any questions to ask us? Arjun, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mudala. So, well, honestly, anyone can answer this question. But basically, what I wanted to ask was, apart from climate change, in the world, there are quite a few other significant problems around. And problems like food and water security, societal polarization, social problems, economic problems, affecting different countries in different ways, which are more impacting maybe underdeveloped countries more than developed countries. Where according to you guys would be like the intersection between these problems? Like certainly climate change and social societal problems have to have a correlation somewhere. And how do you what do you prioritize over? Do you prioritize climate change because it's such a big pressing issue? And if you had to prioritize climate change, are you sacrificing the serious, like taking a problem like uh, societal welfare? Are you like sacrificing the immensity of that problem? Are you diminishing the immensity of that problem? And if so, how do you tackle this? Really, it's for anyone.
Okay, thank you for that incredible question. Yasir, would you like to answer this?
Yes. So as you mentioned, there definitely are problems other than climate, but you see, the climate problem is also as persistent as other problems like poverty, homelessness, and others. But if we are able to join together as a whole to resolve problems one at a time, and if we start with the solutions for climate, then we can introduce technologies without harming the climate. Because if, like you mentioned, problems prioritizing over climate, so once we are able to diminish the problem of the climate anxiety, we can move on towards the other problems.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
Yasir.
you. Thank you. Our next question, Elena.
Yes, thank you. So my question is, how do you expect the issue of climate change to reach underprivileged students and underprivileged classes who have little to almost no awareness about the impact of their actions on the environment? Like they have no idea, but that how big of an issue this is, but they need to know because everyone plays an important role. So how exactly will they find out that they have an important role to play as well? So this
Okay,
question is directed to any of the panelists.
okay. Um, Sarah, would you like to comment?
Sure. Okay. I think that, yeah, it is really important that the issue of climate change should be advocated in the rural areas because climate change profoundly affects the rural areas more than that. And I think that spreading awareness to the rural places, like us also, even if we get an opportunity to go there and spread awareness about it or conduct campaigns to the rural people, I think that can go a long way in helping them realize the importance of the measures to stop climate anxiety and climate change.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Ramkirat, it appears you have another question, but before that, Adrit posted a question in the chat. Okay. Haya, could you check it and tell me? I can't open this.
Is climate anxiety the main problem that climate change is causing? And if not, why make a webinar about it?
Okay, and
Mridula, you're on mute.
sorry, my bad. Adrit mentioned that he would like either Haya or me to answer, and I think I'll take this one. Could you repeat the question, Haya?
Is climate anxiety the main problem that climate change is causing? And if not, why make a webinar about it?
Okay, to ask whether climate anxiety is the main problem caused by climate change is kind of a strong statement to make, considering this like a huge number of different types and different factors that add into the depth of this question and how we should be tackling it and solving it. So, climate anxiety just happens to be one of the more recently acknowledged problems that climate change is causing, and I think it is really important to address. Maybe not a primary issue or a main issue, but still something that deserves its own it needs to be underlined by itself, and it is really significant and something we should consider as important, because a lot of our future generations and even our current generation feel hopeless for the future. They downright feel like they don't have a future because of climate change. They feel like they can't grow up and they can't have families, they can't have kids. They feel like the planet is dying out and there's no hope, and they just feel like their voices aren't being heard. And when you're talking about climate anxiety as an issue, you're straight up saying, you're not alone in this. Your concerns aren't isolated to you, right? I have this too, right? Everyone around you has it too. At some point, some person has woken up and thought, oh my God, what is my life going to look like with climate anxiety, with climate change being such a big problem? So making a webinar is still one of our primary initiatives to address this and to, instead of going, if we want to start global, we have to start with ourselves. And it's coming up to our own school students, speaking to our own population, going to each other and asking, how do you feel about this and what do you have to say? So I would say making a webinar about it is still one of our, you know, a significant step that we have taken. And yeah, thank you. And now, okay, hang on, I'll just check. All right. Brahmakirat, you had a question?
Yes, hello. I do have a question. So, is it okay if the our guest can answer the question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so my question is, so like, what policies or actions do you think is the most effective in addressing the climate anxiety, and which policy or action do you think is not really good for climate anxiety?
Okay,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And first, let me congratulate all of you for this really important webinar and also all your valuable insights. I would say that in order to address climate anxiety in terms of policies, I would think of policies that address climate change. And in terms of addressing climate change, we know those changes that we need to make that are most meaningful in order to, well, make the big transformation that is needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to stay within the temperature increase limits from the Paris Agreement. So I would say the first one is, transitioning to renewable energy. Now we're not there yet because fossil fuel usage remains the most important currently. So we need to focus our activities around supporting a transition to renewable energy. But then we also need to make sure that such a transition, as we were saying earlier, doesn't reinforce inequalities, but rather addresses those inequalities. So questions like what will workers from fossil fuel industry do when we move away from fossil fuel is a very important one. Or what minerals, how many minerals do we need in order to implement this transition to renewable energy is another important question. And we need to make sure again that local communities and vulnerable groups are not left with, the burden of the transition as they're experiencing the burden of climate change currently. I think individual action can be important, as you were all saying, to bring about hope and inspiration. But I think the most important is that we come together and address climate change in a way which is meaningful rather than stay focused on too small initiatives that maybe fail to address the scale of the problem.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea and Brahmakirat. And Avantika, what about you?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I do have a question. So how can countries with limited resources contribute to global and climate change? Global climate change, like how will they contribute?
Okay, and who would you like to direct this question to?
Anybody can answer.
All right. Ayana, if you can unmute. Ayana? Okay, if she's struggling, then Yasir? Okay,
Yes, sure.
Ayana's unmuted. Hang on, Yasir. Ayana, are you able to unmute? If you can't speak, then we can ask Yasser to answer this one. Okay, Yasser, go ahead.
Sure. So the first step countries can take is to adopt and adapt renewable energy resources. Because by investing in renewable energy infrastructures, they can reduce their reliance on fossil fuels and cut emissions. Just like how Kenya and Morocco have made their significant advancements in solar and wind energy. And sustainable agriculture practice is most important because the baseline or the base of any country comes from agriculture, and if we are not being efficient in that, it can contribute in a lot of CO2 emissions. And then comes protecting forests and biodiversity. These are, as everyone knows, the lungs of the earth, because if these are not there, CO2 emissions are just going to increase and increase. And lastly, I can say that promoting climate, to save the climate, more and more campaigns have to be conducted by the government side so that people who don't know how big the issue of climate is, they can be educated, literated, so that their individual efforts also count. That's all I have to say.
Avantika, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. And moving on to Akshara.
Yeah. How does climate anxiety specifically affect young people, and what makes them more vulnerable to it?
Am I audible
Sarah,
now?
yes, you are audible. Okay, to answer Akshara's question, Sarah, can you please?
Akshara, could you repeat your question?
Yes. How does climate anxiety specifically affect young people, and what makes them more vulnerable to it?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that climate anxiety usually affects young people because they experience they know what climate change is in depth, and climate anxiety usually refers to the distress or fear that particularly young people may experience about the future of the planet due to climate change. I think that climate anxiety basically affects young people because young people have an understanding of the total scope of climate change and how it can affect them. And the more you learn about this, the more you start to worry about the future generations. And many young people, I feel, they feel powerless in the face of the massive scale of climate change. And even though they have their concerns, they feel like their efforts are not valued, or efforts can't really change what's happening over there. And I also think that eco grief and eco existential anxiety, that is something I read. I think that also affects young people more than the other people. And I think young people understand the crucial aspects of climate change and they want to take an action. And climate anxiety helps people and encourages them to make a difference. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
And now we have Kashish's question, after which we won't be taking any more questions. Kashish?
How do you think you can involve, or what is the best way to involve people or the young generation who are indifferent or who are unaware about climate change? How do you think you can involve them or bring them into this change? Any of the speakers can speak on this.
Okay. Can we ask our guest speaker to comment?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the students actually gave a great example in response to this question, saying how them attending COP29 was such an inspiring experience, really eye-opening in terms of climate change and the importance of, well, everyone's involvement in addressing it. So I would say if you can't convince someone through words, try to bring them in an action, in a project, in a practical activity, and hopefully they'll see and they'll be inspired by your own example of putting your efforts and energy into a cause which is meaningful to you.
Thank you. That's a great answer.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you to all the students who are asking questions. We won't be taking any more now. And to the questions posted in chat, we will be answering them personally. So, okay. Now, I believe we have a question from Mr. Zishan, sir. Is sir there in the meeting? Okay, if there are no questions. Okay.
I'm extremely
Sounds good.
sorry. Due to network issue, I'm not able to listen. Can you please repeat?
I believe you had a question, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, actually, I just wanted to ask you, do you have any other topics already lined up? Like, what more topics do you feel we can make up webinars about so we reach more people of our age?
Like specifically for climate anxiety or for climate change on a whole?
Yes. Regarding the climate change.
Okay. Sir, I believe that's a pretty loaded question because as we've mentioned before, there are several different factors that go into climate change and how to even begin tackling it. Like first of all, talking about climate awareness, climate education, climate anxiety as a psychological impact, and historical impacts of climate change, what we are doing currently, future considerations, the inclusion of AI. The list of topics is endless, really. There's, a myriad of different topics that we can speak on. But I think the one I would personally find the most interesting is the inclusion of AI in climate change implementation policies. Because, artificial intelligence has also proved to be crucial in many places. Like in the Wayanad landslides, it was extremely, helpful to have because it helped in mapping out the extent of damage and also with several other factors like computer vision, data acquisition, and so on. So I would personally like to, be a part of a webinar on that topic if there ever is one. But yeah, to answer your question, there are several topics that we can take up. It's really, endless.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. We hope this webinar has helped you understand climate anxiety and how to cope with it. Remember, you're not alone in this, and there are many people who care about the environment and want to make a difference.
So sorry, I just realized I was muted. We'd also like to thank our guest speaker, Miss Andreea Pletea. If you have a few words on how the webinar was, could you please let us know?
Yes, would you mind just repeating the question because I had a problem of connectivity?
No problem. We were just asking if you could say a few words on the webinar. how it's proceeded so far.
Yes, yes, it's really impressive to learn from all of you, to learn about, well, how you experience climate change, how you experience climate anxiety, what you're thinking about your experience of attending COP29. So really, it's a privilege for me to be here with you and learn from you. And if I would have to summarize, let's say, the insights from this webinar, I would say that yes, we experience climate anxiety, right? And we acknowledge these emotions of anxiety, of distress, of loss, and they're particularly strong for young people like us. But let's have this climate anxiety fuel us into action rather than overwhelm us and paralyze us. And I think by coming together, educating ourselves, educating others, and then getting involved in projects to address climate change, but also to protect vulnerable communities, is the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And we're really, really grateful to have you here. Your presence has truly graced our webinar. And I'd also like to give my own take on climate anxiety after, being, moderating this webinar. Climate anxiety is, as we know, a growing concern as more people become aware of the severe impacts of climate change on our planet. And with growing awareness, you get growing feelings of dread and helplessness about the future, driven by our ongoing environmental crises. And most of us really aren't alien to them. The, variety of takes given by the students present here honestly makes me breathe a little easier, knowing my concerns are definitely not isolated to me and are shared by most around me as well. I'm assuming that most of the audience who were here can also relate to this. And you should know that climate anxiety can really, as we've mentioned before in the PPT, it can really affect mental health, leading to stress and depression. And yet it also serves as, a powerful motivator for change. We can work towards sustainable solutions and inspire others to join the cause by channeling our fears into action. It's, really essential to stay informed, support each other, and push for policies that protect our environment. Together, we can turn our anxiety into hope and create a positive impact.
Thank you, Mrudula. And truly, we all can agree with this. Before, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to VIBGYOR High and IBM as well as Marathahalli for providing us the opportunity to be part of the Climate Academy as well as for organizing this insightful webinar. It was a privilege to share our knowledge and passion for climate action with such a receptive audience. And I would like to thank the attendees for their active participation. And together, let's continue to work to create a sustainable future for generations to come. I would also like to thank all the teachers, the vice principal, principals of both the schools, and Harshada ma'am would like to add a few of her own words.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Haya. Ladies and gentlemen, all the faculty members and the wonderful students, we gathered here today to celebrate this achievement that our students have. They have created this webinar all by themselves. The research, the material, the organization, all was conducted by our students. And I would like to congratulate them on their hard work, their dedication, creativity, and leadership. I am extremely thrilled to come before you and express my appreciation for all of the students, the ones we saw on screen and ones who worked behind the screen to make this possible. I am sure this is not a small feat to achieve at such a young age. This required really meticulous planning. There had to be very effective communication skills at play, and you had to have the ability to engage such a wide audience. So you have definitely demonstrated exceptional skills in all of these areas. And you have not only organized this, but you also went through the logistics, the coordinating and promotion of the event, while also delivering an insightful content, which shows that you are capable of taking many more initiatives and leading the change with the confidence that we see here. So really, really appreciate, and we feel really proud to be here and call ourselves your teachers. In closing, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to everyone who is present here. You have not only made this webinar a success by being here, but you have also inspired those around you to keep pushing the boundaries and keep exploring new ideas and continue to support in each other in all ways when you embark on your new adventures. I would like to ask all of us here in the webinar to give a huge round of applause for our incredible student leaders, and really just proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It really means a lot to hear that our efforts were, you know, they went to a good place and that they actually impacted everyone. We had a lot of fun organizing this webinar, and it was really incredible and such a new field that we entered into, seeing as we organized this and we went through the details and everything that we have to acknowledge. And yeah, I think Haya and I had a lot of fun with this, and I'd also like to thank her for her efforts as well. Uh, and I'd also like to point out to everyone present in the webinar, while Haya and I moderated this, and we have our presenters over here, Yasser, Sarah, and Ayana, you should know that there was a team of at least 20 people behind the actual webinar who worked behind the scenes to actually promote, to design the posters, to compile all of our necessary research within, I think, less than 10 days. And also help our presenters with their answers, communicate with us about what needed to be done and what needed to be put in the webinar and everything. So I'd honestly love to acknowledge them as well. They did such an incredible job behind the scenes, communicating with us and everything, and honestly really grateful to them.
Yes, thank you so much to all those who've helped us throughout this 10 days that we had to make sure this webinar was a success. And it was a very fun indeed to work with Mridula. She's been quite helpful, and we've learned a lot of things along the way. And there were some pretty comprehensive and remarkable answers given by the audience in the chat that we got to read throughout the webinar as well. We would also like to acknowledge the marketing team at VIBGYOR who did all the publicity in a greener way, which meant no paper was used. There was nothing printed on paper, and the whole process of marketing was online. And we had reached a great audience range as well. So thank you for that.
So once again, a huge thank you to all of our hardworking students who worked on the webinar. And your dedication and commitment to understanding climate change has been invaluable, and you have made this event a success. And thank you so much to our audience as well for actively engaging with us, as Haya said. Your answers were also pretty incredible, so it was really great to see everyone keeping up with us and really engaging in the webinar to the same extent that we are. And thank you to our team, our teachers, our principals, vice principals, and faculty at VIBGYOR. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to Andreea as well, whose presence has been invaluable here today. Deepanjali, ma'am.
Yes, I would like to congratulate all of you here. It was a great effort taken by all the students, and I'm really proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And thank you to everyone for joining. You all can leave the webinar now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.